I grew up in a picture-perfect Connecticut suburb, where every house had a manicured lawn and a story to tell. Mine started like any other, or at least that's what I thought. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story I never thought I'd have the courage to share. Our house on Maple Drive was everything you'd expect from an upper-middle-class American dream. White picket fence, two-car garage, and windows that caught the morning sun just right. My mom, Emma, was the kind of high school art teacher students remembered long after graduation. She had this way of making everyone feel like their work was worthy of the Louvre. Her laugh could fill our entire house, echoing through the halls like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Dad, David Mitchell, was the community's go-to real estate agent. Always dressed in crisp suits, with a smile that could sell a mansion or a modest starter home with equal charm. We were that family that hosted neighborhood BBQs in summer and had the best Halloween decorations in fall. Sunday nights were sacred in our house. We'd pile onto our oversized leather couch, Mom's slightly burnt popcorn in hand. Dad would complain about the kernels, but he'd eat them anyway, making us laugh with his exaggerated crunching. Those moments felt eternal, like nothing could ever change them. But life has a way of shattering even the most perfect reflections. It started with Mom's headaches. Just small ones at first, barely worth mentioning. Then they got worse. The doctors threw around words like aggressive and terminal. I was 16 when they gave us the news. Old enough to understand what was happening, but too young to accept it. Mom tried to keep teaching as long as she could. Her students would bring her art projects to the hospital. The walls of her room became a gallery of teenage expression and love. I watched her fade like a watercolor left in the sun. First her colors dimmed, then her edges began to blur. Dad stopped wearing his crisp suits. His smile became something he had to remember to put on, like a tie or a watch. The medical bills piled up faster than autumn leaves. I'd find him at the kitchen table late at night, calculator in one hand, whiskey in the other. The night Mom died, the world didn't end. It just got quieter. The silence in our house became a physical thing, pressing against my ears like deep water. Dad started drinking more. Not the social drinking he used to do at neighborhood parties. This was different. He'd come home late, stumbling through our too-quiet house. Sometimes he'd sit in Mom's art studio, staring at her unfinished paintings. I tried to be there for him, to be strong like Mom would have wanted. I'd make dinner, help with laundry, try to keep our lives moving forward. But grief has a way of warping things, of making the familiar strange. The first time I noticed something was off, I dismissed it. Dad's hugs lasted too long. His hands would linger when he touched my shoulder. "You look so much like her," he'd say, his voice thick with something I couldn't name. I told myself it was grief. That he was just missing Mom. That we both were. The Patriots were playing that Sunday night. I remember because Dad used to love watching games with Mom, even though she knew nothing about football. She'd ask the most ridiculous questions just to make him laugh. That night, he'd been drinking since afternoon. I was doing homework on the couch, trying to keep my grades up despite everything. He sat down next to me, closer than usual. "You're so beautiful, Sarah," he whispered. His words slurred slightly at the edges. I felt my body tense, though I didn't know why. When his hand touched my thigh, the world stopped spinning. Everything that came after exists in fragments in my memory. The sound of the TV announcer's voice, oddly cheerful. The smell of whiskey on his breath. The weight of him. The pain. My own silence, heavy as stone in my throat. Afterward, he went upstairs like nothing had happened. I stayed on the couch until sunrise, unable to move. Unable to cry. Unable to understand how my world had shifted so completely off its axis. The next morning, he made breakfast like it was any other day. Pancakes with too much syrup, just the way I used to like them. "You should eat," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You need your strength." I sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we used to have family dinners. The same one where Mom used to grade art projects. The food tasted like ashes in my mouth. School became my sanctuary. I threw myself into my studies, staying late for any club or activity I could find. Anything to avoid going home. My teachers noticed the change in me. "Sarah's so focused," they told Dad at parent-teacher conferences. "She's really channeling her grief into her work." If only they knew what I was really running from. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, listening for his footsteps in the hall. Sometimes they'd pass by. Sometimes they wouldn't. I learned to sleep with my desk chair propped against my door handle. But he had a key. He always had a key. The first time he apologized, I almost believed him. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he said, tears in his eyes. "I just miss her so much. You remind me of her. We only have each other now." His words were poison wrapped in grief. They made me question everything. Was this my fault? Did I remind him too much of Mom? Was this some twisted form of love? The questions ate at me like acid. I stopped eating properly. Lost weight. My friends noticed, but I pushed them away. How could I explain what was happening? Who would believe that David Mitchell, pillar of the community, could do this to his own daughter? Then Jessica Parker came into our lives. She was a client of Dad's, looking for a fresh start after her divorce. When he first brought her home for dinner, I felt hope flutter in my chest. Maybe this would fix things. Maybe he would stop. Jessica was everything Mom wasn't. Loud where Mom had been gentle. Flashy where Mom had been elegant. But she smiled at me like we shared a secret. For a few weeks, things seemed better. Dad spent more time with her. His visits to my room became less frequent. I started to breathe easier. Then one night, they both came to my room. Jessica's smile wasn't friendly anymore. It was hungry. What followed was worse than anything before. Because now there were two of them. Two sets of hands. Two voices telling me this was normal. That this was love. That this was what family meant. I threw up afterward, my body rejecting everything they'd tried to make me believe. The next day at school, I had a panic attack in the bathroom. My English teacher found me there, hyperventilating between the sinks. She wanted to call Dad. I begged her not to. Told her I was just stressed about college applications. She believed me. Everyone always believed the lies. It was easier than seeing the truth. I started researching colleges that night. Looking for scholarships. Anywhere far from Connecticut. Far from him. Boston University became my target. Their law program was excellent, but more importantly, it was far enough away to matter. I studied until my eyes burned. Wrote and rewrote my essays until they were perfect. When the acceptance letter came with a full scholarship offer, I cried for the first time since Mom died. Dad was proud. He told everyone his daughter was going to be you. His brilliant, beautiful daughter. The words made me sick. But I smiled and nodded and planned my escape. The day I left for college, he hugged me in front of the neighbors. Played the part of the proud, grieving father sending his only child off to school. No one saw how his fingers dug into my arms. How his whispered goodbye carried a promise I didn't want to hear. As I watched our house disappear in the rearview mirror of my friend's car, I felt something crack inside me. Not breaking, but opening. Like a door I thought was locked suddenly showing a sliver of light. I didn't know it then, but that crack would eventually let the truth come pouring out. It would let me find my voice again. But first, I had to learn how to breathe without fear. How to sleep without nightmares. How to trust without trembling. Boston was waiting, and with it, the first chapter of my real life. The life I would choose for myself. The life that started the moment I decided to survive. Boston in September felt like freedom. The city air tasted different from the suffocating suburbs I'd left behind. My dorm room was tiny, but it was mine. No one else had a key. For the first time in years, I could sleep without listening for footsteps. My roommate, Kelly, was from California and loved to talk about surfing. She filled our room with beach photos and the smell of coconut shampoo. Her normalcy was both comforting and painful to watch. I wondered what it would be like to be that carefree. To not carry secrets like stones in your pockets. Classes became my anchor. I chose seats near exits, kept my back to walls. Old habits die hard even in new cities. That's where I met Ashley Thompson. She sat next to me in Introduction to Criminal Justice, her dark hair streaked with purple. She didn't try to fill silences with small talk. Instead, she shared her coffee and her notes. Never pushing, never prying. Just being there. Dad called every Sunday night. I'd stare at his name on my phone screen, my heart racing. "I miss you, sweetheart," he'd say. "The house is so empty without you." Each call left me shaking. But I was getting better at hiding it. At pretending everything was fine. Ashley noticed things though. The way I flinched when people moved too quickly. How I never talked about home. She started inviting me to study sessions that turned into late-night talks. We'd sit in the campus coffee shop until closing. She'd tell me about her dreams of becoming an investigative journalist. About growing up in Chicago with 4 brothers. About her mother who worked 3 jobs to put her through college. I found myself wanting to tell her everything. The words would rise in my throat like tide water. But I'd swallow them back down. Some truths felt too heavy to share. Then Jessica started showing up in Dad's calls. "We miss you," they'd say together. "You should come home for the weekend." I made excuses about studying. About work-study commitments. About anything I could think of. Ashley started saving me seats in all our shared classes. She'd text me funny memes at random hours. Send me pictures of dogs she saw on campus. Small things that made the world feel less sharp. Less dangerous. Midterms came and went. My grades were perfect. Dad bragged about them to anyone who would listen. "My Sarah," he'd say in voicemails. Always making me proud. I deleted his messages without listening to the end. The nightmares got worse as Thanksgiving approached. I couldn't avoid going home forever. The thought of returning to that house made me physically ill. Ashley found me having a panic attack in the library. She sat with me between the stacks, just breathing. Not asking questions. Just being there. When I could speak again, she handed me her coffee. "Whatever it is," she said, "you don't have to carry it alone." I almost told her then. Almost let the truth spill out between us. But fear has a way of sealing your lips, of making you doubt your own story. The week before Thanksgiving, Dad announced he was coming to visit. "Just to check on you," he said. "Make sure you're eating properly." I couldn't sleep for days. Ashley noticed the dark circles under my eyes, the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Stay at my place," she offered. "My rooma. T's gone for the weekend." I said no. Told her it would be fine, that I was just nervous about Dad seeing my grades. The lies tasted bitter on my tongue. He arrived on a Friday afternoon. Brought Jessica with him. They took me to dinner at an expensive restaurant. Everything looked normal from the outside. A father treating his daughter and his girlfriend to a nice meal. But under the table, his hand found my knee. Jessica's smile held secrets. I excused myself to the bathroom and threw up my expensive dinner. When we got back to my dorm, Kelly was at a party. The room felt too small with them in it. Dad's cologne filled the space. Jessica's perfume mixed with it, making me dizzy. "We've missed you so much," she said, touching my hair. I backed away, hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. What happened next exists in fragments. The sound of my desk lamp hitting the floor. Jessica's manicured nails digging into my arm. Dad's whispered words about family and love. My own voice finally finding its strength. "No." The scream tore from my throat like something wild. Like all the words I'd swallowed over the years. I fought this time. Kicked and scratched and screamed. The noise brought people running. Doors opening in the hallway. Voices asking what was wrong. Dad switched instantly. Became the concerned father. "She's having a breakdown," he told my hallmates. "She's been so stressed about school." But Ashley was there. She'd heard my scream from down the hall. She saw the truth in my eyes. In my torn shirt. In the way I couldn't stop shaking. She didn't hesitate. "Get out," she told them. "Or I'm calling the police." Dad tried to argue. Tried to play the concerned parent. But Ashley stood her ground. Other students were watching now. Phones in hands. Witnesses. They had no choice but to leave. I collapsed the moment they were gone. Ashley caught me before I hit the floor. Held me while I shook apart. While years of silence finally broke. The truth poured out of me like a flood. Every dark night. Every betrayal. Every moment I thought I was alone. Ashley listened. Called the campus police. Held my hand while I filed a report. Stayed with me through the longest night of my life. When morning came, I was different. Still broken, but no longer silent. No longer alone. The truth was out there now. Like a bird finally freed from its cage. I couldn't take it back. Didn't want to. Boston's morning air felt different that day. Cleaner somehow. Like I could finally breathe all the way down to my toes. Ashley brought me coffee and her unwavering support. "What do you want to do now?" she asked. For the first time in years, I had an answer. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to make sure he could never hurt anyone else. I wanted to find my voice and use it. The road ahead would be long. There would be police statements. Lawyers. Therapy sessions. But I wasn't laking it alone anymore. That morning, sitting in a police station with Ashley beside me. I started to believe in something I'd lost long ago. Hope. It felt foreign on my tongue, like a language I was just learning to speak. But it was there, growing stronger with each word I spoke, with each truth I finally set free. The investigation moved like molasses in winter. Each day brought new challenges, new hurdles to overcome. Detective Lisa Martinez handled my case with gentle determination. She'd been working special victims for 15 years. Your story matters, she told me. Every detail helps build the case. I spent hours in her office, reliving memories I'd tried to bury. Ashley came with me to every interview, sat outside every therapy session, brought me coffee and her quiet strength. The news hit our Connecticut community like a balm. David Mitchell, respected realtor, arrested for sexual abuse. Jessica Parker, too, charged as an accomplice. People chose sides quickly. Some couldn't believe it. Not David, they'd say. He was such a devoted father. Others remembered things differently. Teachers who'd noticed my withdrawal. Neighbors who'd heard screams they'd dismissed. My phone filled with messages. Some supportive, others accusatory. I deleted them all. The only voices I could bear were Ashley's and my therapist's. Dr. Sarah Chen became my lifeline. Twice a week, I'd sit in her office, unraveling years of trauma like a tangled ball of yarn. Healing isn't linear, she'd remind me. Some days will feel like steps backward. That's okay. The legal process dragged on. Depositions. Evidence collection. Each step felt like walking through quicksand. But I kept going. Ashley started a support group on campus. Survivors supporting survivors, she called it. Other stories emerged. Other voices joined mine. We became a chorus of truth-tellers, breaking silences that had bound us for too long. The preliminary hearing was set for spring. Cherry blossoms bloomed along Commonwealth Avenue. Nature's reminder that beauty could follow darkness. I saw Dad for the first time since that night in my dorm. He looked smaller somehow. Less powerful. His lawyer had tried to paint me as unstable. Traumatized by my mother's death. Imagining things. But the evidence was there. Text messages. Hotel receipts. Jessica's testimony, trying to save herself. She'd turned on him the moment she was arrested. Told everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. The media caught wind of the story. Prominent realtor faces abuse charges. Daughter breaks silence on years of abuse. My face was everywhere. But I wasn't ashamed anymore. This was my truth. My story to tell. Ashley helped me write an article for the school paper. Not about the case specifically, but about survival. About finding your voice. About the importance of being believed. It went viral. Other survivors reached out. Shared their stories. Thanked me for speaking up. Each message felt like a small victory. The trial date was set for summer. I decided to stay in Boston. My dorm room became my sanctuary. Ashley and I spent long nights preparing. She'd quiz me on my testimony. Help me practice staying calm under cross-examination. Dr. Chen taught me grounding techniques. Ways to stay present when the memories threatened to overwhelm. The courthouse loomed large on trial day. Television crews clustered outside like vultures. Ashley held my hand as we walked through them. Her purple hair bright against the gray morning. Inside, the courtroom felt too small. too warm. Dad sat at the defense table, tried to catch my eye. I looked straight ahead. My testimony lasted 3 days. Every detail examined, every moment relived. But my voice stayed strong, clear. This was my truth. No one could take it from me anymore. The jury deliberated for 2 days, the longest 48 hours of my life. When the verdict came back, I was ready. Guilty on all counts. Dad's face crumpled as the judge read the sentence. 25 years. No possibility of parole for 15. Jessica got 12 years. It was over. But it wasn't. This was just the beginning. I changed my major to law the next semester. Focused on family court and victims advocacy. Ashley supported every decision. Became more than just a friend. Became family. The kind that you choose. The kind that builds you up instead of breaking you down. We graduated together 3 years later. She went into investigative journalism. I headed to law school. Both of us determined to make change. To help others find their voices. Today, I work with survivors. Help them tell their stories. Guide them through the system I once found so overwhelming. Each case is different. Each story unique. But the truth remains constant. Silence protects abusers. Speaking up, however hard, however scary, brings light. And in that light, healing becomes possible. Mom's art still hangs in my office. A reminder that beauty can survive darkness. That love shouldn't hurt. That family is what we make it. Ashley still brings me coffee every morning. Still sends me pictures of dogs she sees. Still stands beside me when the memories get too loud. We've built something beautiful from the ashes of what was broken. A foundation of truth. Of trust. Of real love. To anyone reading this who feels trapped. Who thinks they're alone. You're not. Your voice matters. Your truth deserves to be heard. And there are people waiting to listen. To help. To stand beside you while you find your strength. I know because I found them. Because I am one of them now. This is my story. But it's not just mine anymore. It belongs to every survivor who's ever felt alone. To every voice that's ever been silenced. To every person who's ever thought about speaking up but felt afraid. Your story, Ma. Hers too. And when you're ready to tell it, we'll be here to listen. To believe. To help you find your way back to the light. Because that's what survival really means. Not just living through the darkness, but learning to shine despite it. End.